Cryonics or cryopreservation is a method by which people hope to overcome death. How close to reality these hopes are, I will tell you in the video. Many scientists consider cryonics to be just another pseudoscience, but despite this, its ideas are becoming increasingly popular in narrow circles. People who agree to cryofreezing believe that they can come back to life 100 or even 1,000 years after death. This raises the question among researchers and those who are interested in the concept, whether there are further prospects for this practice and what its actual state looks like at the moment. History of origins. The first scientific experiments on freezing began back in the 17th century, but more serious research on this concept began in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, when biologist Porfiry Bakhmatiev froze animals and insects, thereby putting them into anabiosis, and then reviving them again after some time. At that time, the scientist was sure that this method could be tested not only on bats, but also on humans, for which it is only necessary to determine the right conditions. But he did not have time to finish his experiment. In 1913, the scientist contracted malaria and died. Bakhmatiev's experiments were not the only ones. In the 1920s, Lev Termen, inventor of the thermovox, an unusual electronic musical instrument working on the generator principle, was engaged in cryonics. Later, the researcher's main idea was to fight against death. He noticed that animal corpses are perfectly preserved in the permafrost and publicly regretted that Vladimir Lenin was embalmed rather than frozen after his death. The topic of cryonics became so popular that it began to be mentioned in literature. In 1922, Alexander Yaroslavsky dedicated his poem of anabiosis to it, and in 1928 Vladimir Mayakovsky's bedbug appeared. In the US in 1931 was published the story Jameson's Companion by Neil R. Jones about a scientist who froze his brains, and aliens who revived a man by giving him a robot body. All these and other fantastic works prompted Robert Ettinger in 1964 to write the book Perspectives on Immortality, which served in the future as a practical guide for the first American cryonics firms. The scientist himself has been dubbed the father of the concept. First Cryonics Institute. Then, in 1976, he founded the Cryonics Institute, which is still in operation today. It holds more than 200 frozen bodies, including the body of the founder himself, his two wives, and his mother. It is worth noting that by the early 1960s, human corpses were frozen in liquid nitrogen solely for cosmetic preservation. The first person to be frozen in order to revive him was psychology professor James Bedford in 1967. The operation was performed by a group of scientists and doctors who, by the standards of modern cryonics, conducted it crudely. Thus, instead of draining blood from the body of the deceased and replacing it with a special non-freezing liquid that was supposed to preserve all tissues and protect them from mechanical and other damage, this solution was injected directly into Bedford's blood. Initially, the body of the first volunteer was in an isothermal container with dry ice, and then it was moved to a Dewar container resembling an aluminum container with liquid nitrogen. What's interesting is that despite not quite proper cryonisation, after examination by doctors and scientists in 1991, it was concluded that Bedford's body was almost undamaged and in a frozen state. No further research has been done since then. To date, only 2 countries, the US and Russia, have cryonisation equipment. Collectively, more than 250 bodies have been frozen worldwide, and nearly 2,000 people have signed contracts for post-mortem cryonisation procedures. In the United States, the cost of cryonisation starts at $28,000, and in Russia, it starts at $15,000. In both cases, however, the price can be less if the entire body is frozen, but only the head or brain separately. Opinion of cryonists and the current state of the concept. Cryonics enthusiasts believe that a person becomes completely dead when he reaches the so-called information theoretical death, or the point at which the information contained in his mind cannot be recovered. Therefore, the purpose of freezing the recently deceased is to prevent that very chemical process of fission. Scientists who support this concept suggest that preserving the body in this way will help, with the help of future technologies, to restore information in human cells and reconstruct his memory. Such statements are more reminiscent of a sci-fi movie scenario, and cryonists agree that there is no technology yet for reviving humans. Therefore, they have settled on the idea of scanning the preserved brain in order to digitally reconstruct its host. That said, do not assume that cryonics is part of cryobiology. According to scientists who do not support the ideas of the concept, the practice is biologically ridiculous, and cryonists often demonstrate ignorance of medicine and other sciences related to it. According to neuroscientist Michael Hendricks, dreams of the possibility of reanimating the dead in the future are a false hope that goes beyond the development of technology and is impossible in relation to dead tissue. To date, the strongest evidence for the existence of cryonics has come from experiments with mammalian brains. In 2016, researchers showed that rabbit brains can be frozen and thawed while preserving the connections between neurons. The challenges of cryonics. One of the main challenges in developing the idea is engineering problems, namely storing and freezing the body at -196 degrees Celsius, which causes enormous damage to body cells, particularly the brain. Dendrites, which can be severely cracked during freezing, will not be able to recover after thawing. American neurobiologists have called this process the acoustic destruction event and cited the example of an ice cube, which when put in a drink, once melted, will not be able to regain its former qualities. The next problem for the development of cryonics was the lack of material investment by the government as a whole or by individual companies. The movement has serious and obvious financial problems, cash flows are simply unsustainable, and cryonics service companies in the US rely on occasional large donations from wealthy members of various communities to cover the deficit. Insurance companies are also hardly willing to consider cryonics. However, in America, for example, there are cryonics insurance agents who specialize in this field. Why cryonics is unpromising? American scientists who condemn cryonics have advanced a number of reasons debunking the ideas of cryonists, which may cause the concept to become less popular in the near future. Today's cryonics has little practical information. Most claims are based on theoretical knowledge. The high future costs of reanimation and the low likelihood of creating technology that will allow frozen bodies to be resurrected while circumventing the laws of physics and chemistry. Lack of interest from future society. After they can revive a few thousand medieval peasants, from their perspective, who wanted to see the future, why would they care about reviving any particular person? Societal collapse or mass catastrophe. According to scientists, there is a possibility that the people of the future will be able to resurrect not only those people who can help society, but also those who want to destroy that society. Magical nanotechnological methods of the future could also turn any brain into a superbrain. Whatever superbrains may be in the future, they probably won't care too much about the typical human hassle. Therefore, any matter in a frozen brain and its final form will not be the same as it was cryonized, which means a completely different person could be reborn. Reintegration problems after revival. There are many medical problems associated with resuscitating and bringing a person back to life after being frozen, which is not considered possible at this time. But it is also worth noting that a person who was brought back from the dead in 100 years may encounter many other non-medical problems, described below. Culture shock. Given the fact that many older people struggle to keep up with technology, someone who has not been around for decades or even centuries will see a completely different world, which will make it difficult for the old new person to adjust to the new realities. Language. It is likely to change considerably in the intervening period or be replaced by one that the person does not know. Finances. The person will probably have to support and provide for himself financially in some way. He may have to learn a new profession in order to pay for unexpected electricity bills due to the centuries-old freeze. Many of the technical qualifications of the present will become obsolete. The person's lifetime assets may have already depreciated by then due to changes in currency. Isolation. All of the person's friends and relatives will presumably be dead, which is also quite difficult to endure after the rebirth. Ambiguous/complex legal status. It will be difficult to understand who the person is, a citizen of the future time or not, whether he will be able to move freely or whether he will have difficulties with his documents. Moral presentism. Future society may view actions taken by a person in his original life as strange and far different from the norm. All of this, according to scientists, can cause a person a great emotional turmoil, due to which he will face a number of social and psychological problems after awakening. A person may also experience an identity crisis or, on the contrary, may acquire delusions of grandeur. Cryonics appeals to its adherents because it can lift the veil of mystery regarding the unexplored future that many modern people yearn to see. In addition, the very idea of cryonics allows one to think that death can be overcome, and thus can be avoided. In essence, all cryonics companies sell us the hope of an immortal life, rather than a ready-made solution to the problem. Whether it is possible to overcome death and whether humanity can cope with it, we will only know in the future, with a new wave of technological progress. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Give it a thumbs up. Write in the comments about what else interesting you can tell about this video. See you in the new video.